A shared disagreement, so against what I mentioned before, rationalizing the theories in particular and rational choice theories. So a shared disagreement against the idea that the economic sphere is autonomous, doesn't depend on embedding rule systems like the state, like law, etc. And that the economic sphere is structured by natural laws that are universal, neither historical nor contextual. So in a sense, the liberal economist is the enemy here, in one way to put it. A shared disagreement also against the idea that the economic sphere would be naturally, so in terms of natural law, in the sense of Locke and John Locke or Adam Smith, preeminent, and in a sense also somehow morally preeminent, and that therefore the logics of that economic sphere should prevail everywhere else in other parts of society. And a shared disagreement against the idea that there is something like autonomous and decontextualized agency with a universal and with a natural and universal notion of rationality that could be, for example, deciphered from studying the behavior of undergraduate students in American colleges, like a lot of studies are doing those days in economics or in psychology. And a universal desire to maximize individual utility. So those are, I think, at least that's my way to summarize the things against which we agree to disagree. Nevertheless, in spite of this basic core, there's a significant diversity of expression, and as I mentioned before, there are divides within institutional theory, within the broad family of institutional theory, and I see three main divides. First, there's a disciplinary divide, so I explained the way in which this happened at the turn of the 20th century, but definitely we have different traditions that have crystallized very differently in economics, in sociology, in political science, and in org theory. That's quite clear. We also have epistemological and conceptual divides. Interestingly, we cannot map very clearly the disciplinary divides and the epistemological divides, because sometimes within sociology, for example, you will have some rational choice institutionalists and some cultural institutionalists and some historical sociologists. So the mapping is not perfect. I mean, there is, obviously in political science there is more rational choice institutionalists than cultural institutionalists, for example, but the mapping is not completely perfect here. And we have also geographical divides. US versus Europe in the broad sense, or North America is a more actually adequate term than US here, because the whole Alberta School and North Canada is a big part of the institutional debate. So North America versus Europe, and even within the US we probably can make a difference between the West, what I call the West Coast and East Coast forms of institutionalism. The East Coast form being closer to the European variants, more historical and more structural, in a sense, forms of institutionalism, less cultural. There's been, as I mentioned before, recent tendencies at dialogue, debates, cross-fertilization. We meet each other in conferences, we listen to each other, but interestingly, it is very limited. And one of the examples I like to give is that in the two handbooks I mentioned before, there's nearly no overlap of authors. I mean, if you look at the list of authors in the two handbooks, they are, on the whole, mostly separate groups of authors.